This mixture costs pennies per square foot. It requires no cement truck, no rebar, no expansion joints, and no power tools. Yet it can build a garden path that outlasts modern concrete by a factor of 10. Despite being proven for over 2,000 years, it doesn't appear in a single American building code. It's called stabilized earth. And when you mix it the way the Romans did, it turns into a stone-hard surface that shrugs off rain, frost, and root damage for a century or more. By the end, you'll know what it is, how it works, and why the modern construction industry pretends it doesn't exist. Let's dive in. Right now, the average American homeowner spends between $8 and $18 per square foot on a poured concrete garden path. That means a modest 4-foot wide, 30-foot path from your driveway to your back garden runs anywhere from $960 to $2,160 after labor. And if you have looked into replacing a cracked concrete walk, you already know the alternatives are not cheap either. Stamped concrete pushes past $25 per square foot. Natural flagstone runs $30 to $50. Poured pavers with a professional install can easily hit $40. The cement bags alone, the ones every hardware store pushes as the foundation of any hard surface, have risen in price by nearly 40% in the last 5 years. And here is the part nobody puts in the sales brochure. Ordinary Portland cement concrete is rated for a service life of roughly 30 to 50 years in a residential garden setting. It cracks, it heaves, it spalls in freeze-thaw cycles. When it fails past a certain point, you demolish it, haul it to a landfill at your own expense, and pour it all over again at full retail. That is not a permanent surface. That is a subscription plan poured out of a mixer truck. And the concrete industry itself is not exactly getting more sustainable. The production of Portland cement alone is responsible for roughly 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions, according to Chatham House and the International Energy Agency, that is more than aviation, shipping, and all industrial refrigeration combined. You are paying more than ever for a material that damages the atmosphere while it slowly cracks apart under your feet. And when you see what it costs to build a full, stabilized earth path, you will understand why no building supply company has ever advertised one. The dirt beneath your feet has been holding up structures since before you were born. It does not degrade, it does not require expansion joints, and it does not care whether a hard freeze hits in January or a heat wave hits in July. But the real question is not whether stabilized earth works. The archaeology on that was settled 2,000 years ago. The real question is what happens when you mix your own backyard soil with the same 3 cheap ingredients the Romans used. And that is where this technique stops being a historical curiosity and starts being a threat to a $600 billion industry. But to see why, you need to understand the mechanism. Because once you see how simple the chemistry actually is, you will never look at a bag of Portland cement the same way again. Stabilized earth is a composite material. That term sounds like a textbook, but the principle is one you already know. If you have ever squeezed wet clay in your hand and watched it hold its shape, you have observed the first half of the equation. Clay particles are microscopically flat plates. When they are moist, they slide against each other. When they dry and compact under pressure, they lock together with enormous mechanical strength. The second half of the equation is a binder. In a modern concrete path, that binder is Portland cement, which reacts with water in a process called hydration to form calcium silicate hydrate crystals. Those crystals cement the aggregate together into a rigid mass. In stabilized earth, the binder is much simpler. It is lime. Lime is calcium hydroxide, produced by burning limestone or oyster shells and then slaking the resulting quicklime with water. When lime is blended with clay-bearing soil and moisture, a chemical reaction called pozzolanic activity begins. The calcium in the lime bonds with the silica and alumina naturally present in the clay. Over weeks and months, those bonds form calcium silicate hydrate and calcium aluminate hydrate. Those are the same crystalline structures that give Portland cement its strength. The difference is that this reaction happens slowly at ambient temperature, using materials you can find in any hardware store or ancient tidal flat, and the resulting surface continues to gain strength for decades. This is why Roman lime concrete is still standing 2,000 years after it was mixed, while modern Portland concrete is cracking apart within a stabilized earth path made from 4 inches of clay-loam soil blended with roughly 10 to 15% hydrated lime by volume. moistened to plastic consistency, laid in shallow lifts, and compacted with a hand tamper, will develop a compressive strength between 400 and 1,200 pounds per square inch within its first 90 days. That is not enough to hold up a highway. But here is where the engineering starts. Add a small percentage of pozzolanic aggregate, meaning any finely ground volcanic ash, crushed brick, coal fly ash, or even ordinary wood ash from your fireplace, and the compressive strength jumps to between 1,500 and 2,500 pounds per square inch within a year. That is enough to serve as a garden path. That is enough to hold up a wheelbarrow, a walk-behind mower, or the weight of an adult standing on it for a lifetime. And none of it requires a single bag of Portland cement or a single hour of a licensed concrete contractor. That fact alone tells you why you have never been told about it. And unlike modern concrete, a stabilized earth path does not need to be poured, screeded, and finished in a single afternoon race against setting time. The lime-clay reaction is slow and forgiving. You can mix it in a wheelbarrow, lay it in short sections, tamp it firm, and walk away. It will keep hardening for months. In a region with normal rainfall, that means your surface actually gets stronger the longer it sits. Now, there is a second source of natural binding material that most people have never heard of. It is called tabby. Tabby is a coastal concrete made from oyster shells burned in a wood fire to produce lime, then blended with sand, water, and additional broken shells. It has been documented by archaeologists along the Atlantic coast of North America, in the Caribbean, and along the coast of West Africa. Some of the oldest surviving tabby structures in the American Southeast, at sites like Kingsley Plantation in Florida and along the coast of Georgia, date to the late 1700s and remain structurally intact today. They were not maintained by cement contractors. They were not repaired with epoxy injection. They simply sat there, exposed to hurricanes and salt spray, and refused to fail. When soil scientists analyze tabby chemistry, they find the same calcium silicate bonding structures that appear in Roman concrete and in modern lime-stabilized subgrades. That is not fringe archaeology. That is documented material behavior, but if you think this is old, you are only scratching the surface. In the 1st century BCE, the Roman engineer Vitruvius wrote a 10-volume treatise called De Arte. In Book 2, Chapter 6, he describes a specific mixture the Romans called opus signinum. It was a floor and pavement material made from crushed terracotta tiles blended with lime and water. Vitruvius specified the exact ratios: 2 parts crushed tile to 1 part slaked lime, blended to a stiff plastic consistency, laid in courses, and beaten smooth with wooden mallets. The Romans used opus signinum for kitchen floors, courtyard paths, cistern linings, and bath complexes. Modern archaeologists have excavated intact opus signinum surfaces in Pompeii, Herculaneum, and across North Africa that remain hard, level, and waterproof more than 2,000 years after they were laid. In 2023, a team at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology published a peer-reviewed study in the journal Science Advances explaining why it discovered that Roman lime concrete contains what they called lime clasts, small white inclusions of unreacted lime distributed throughout the matrix. When a microcrack forms and rainwater enters, the water dissolves those clasts and releases fresh calcium ions. Those ions then react with atmospheric carbon dioxide and reform new calcium carbonate crystals inside the crack. Sealing it from the inside, Roman concrete is self-healing. Ordinary Portland concrete is not. Much of the reason Roman garden paths still exist and modern ones do not comes down to that single chemical difference. He was not the only one to discover this. In the 3rd century BCE in China, engineers working on the walls surrounding the Ming Dynasty city of Nanjing developed a related mixture called sanhitu, meaning 3-part mud. It combined lime, sticky rice, flour, and clay soil. The amylopectin in the rice starch acted as an organic plasticizer and pozzolane enhancer. Sections of the Nanjing city wall laid in the 1300s using sanhitu mortars between the stone blocks are still standing in load-bearing condition today. Chinese materials scientists at Zhejiang University have replicated the mixture in the laboratory and confirmed compressive strengths exceeding many modern mortars. This is not folklore. This is documented performance data. By the 1200s, nearly every major civilization on the planet was using some form of lime-stabilized earth for pavements, floors, and low walls. Persian caravanserais used it. Byzantine courtyards used it. Andean cities like Chan in Peru used adobe pavements blended with lime and volcanic ash. The Earth was already covered in stabilized Earth surfaces. It just never got the credit. But the Romans and the Chinese were not even close to the first civilizations to compact soil with a mineral binder and produce a hard surface. Recent excavations at the Neolithic site of Kaytalyuk in modern Turkey, dating to roughly 7,500 BCE, have uncovered plaster floors made from lime and fine soil. Those floors were resurfaced dozens of times over the centuries the settlement was occupied. The original layers, laid 9,000 years ago, remain intact beneath the more recent applications. Archaeologists at Stanford and the University of Cambridge have documented the layering in detail. That means a human population more than 9,000 years ago was using the same lime and clay. Chemistry you can replicate in your own backyard for pennies. And yet almost none of this appears in any modern landscaping conversation today. Now, fast forward to the man who took stabilized Earth further than anyone in the modern era and was nearly erased from mainstream construction for it. In the 1920s, a French engineer named François Coinero, whose earlier writings from the 1790s were being rediscovered, inspired a wave of European experimentation with what became known as fils de terre, or rammed earth. In the United States, in the 1930s, agricultural engineer Ralph Patty at South Dakota State College published a series of research bulletins on rammed earth and lime-stabilized soil construction. He documented houses, foundations, and pathways built with nothing but local soil, agricultural lime, and hand tampers that remained structurally sound after decades of prairie weather. During World War II, the U.S. of Agriculture funded further research on soil cement and lime soil pavements because materials like steel and Portland cement were being rationed for the war effort. The USDA published detailed manuals showing that a rural landowner could build permanent pathways, driveways, and even farm building foundations for a fraction of the cost of conventional concrete. Then the war ended. Portland's cement production ramped back up. The manuals were quietly discontinued. Now, if you were thinking this sounds like a technique that could never compete with modern concrete on a serious project, a team of engineers at the University of Kansas thought the same thing, and what they found changes the calculation entirely. In a peer-reviewed study published through the Kansas Transportation, researchers evaluated lime-stabilized soil subgrades used under actual state highways. They documented compressive strength gains of over 300% compared to untreated soil, moisture resistance improvements exceeding 200%, and freeze-thaw durability that met or exceeded the performance of Portland's cement-treated bases. Similar findings have been published by the Portland Cement Association itself, by Texas A&M, and by the National Lime Association. Lime-stabilized soil is not fringe. It is used every single day underneath American interstate highways. It is simply invisible above the surface where most homeowners would ever see it. Separately, the National Park Service has documented and preserved dozens of tabby ruins along the southeastern U.S. coast. Some of those structures, built in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, have survived multiple direct hits from Category 3 and Category 4 hurricanes without structural failure. The Park Service maintains detailed technical bulletins on tabby restoration that any homeowner can download for free. And in Australia, the CSIRO, that country's national scientific research agency, has published field data on stabilized earth pathways and driveways, showing service lifespans exceeding 80 years with minimal maintenance in climates ranging from tropical to arid. Every one of these examples is documented, published, and verifiable. And yet the total number of stabilized earth garden paths recognized by any American residential building code remains effectively zero. So if this technique predates Portland cement by more than 9,000 years and was confirmed by MIT in 2023, why isn't it in a single suburban landscaping guide? Because the system was never designed to accommodate something you can mix in a wheelbarrow. The modern American residential construction market runs on standardized products with recognizable brand names, standardized delivery methods, standardized labor categories, and standardized inspection procedures. Stabilized earth is not on any of those lists. Not because it was tested and rejected, but because no one with a lobbying budget ever asked for it to be included. There is no stabilized earth industry. There is no residential trade association promoting lime soil pavements. There is no manufacturer sending representatives to state code hearings. There is no product code number for a mixture of your own backyard dirt and a bag of hydrated lime. And without a product code, no landscape designer will specify it, no general contractor will bid on it, and no municipal inspector will sign off on it as an approved surface. This is not a ban. It is something more effective than a ban. It is structural invisibility. The American residential concrete and paving market generates over $60 billion a year in revenue. That revenue depends on batch plants, mixer trucks, licensed installers, and repeated demolition and replacement cycles. Every dollar that flows through that system passes through equipment that someone owns, maintains, and invoices for. A stabilized earth path generates no delivery ticket. It requires no ready-mix order. It needs no formwork rental, no rebar delivery, and no expansion joint sealant. It creates no recurring revenue stream for any party at any point in the supply chain. From the perspective of the modern construction economy, a stabilized earth path is not a competitor. It is an entity. It does not fit into the financial architecture, and therefore, it does not exist within the regulatory architecture. No one conspired to suppress it. The frameworks that govern American residential construction were simply written for products that scale. Products that can be manufactured in central facilities, shipped in bulk, installed by certified crews, and financed through approved lending structures. A mixture you scoop from your own backyard and blend with a $12 bag of lime does not clear a single one of those gates, and so it vanishes. Not suppressed, just never seen. Now, if you are thinking the output is too crude to matter in your life, stop and consider what you actually need a garden path to do. A garden path needs to shed rain. It needs to resist weed growth. It needs to hold up under a person's weight, a wheelbarrow's weight, and the occasional weight of a compact garden tractor. It needs to look natural against your plantings. It needs to survive freeze-thaw cycles and root heave. Every one of those requirements is met by a properly blended, stabilized earth surface. None of them require a $2,000 concrete pour. All of them can be served by a mixture that costs less than a dinner for two. If you want to start lowering your garden and hardscape costs today, we put together a full manual that covers everything in this video and more. The link is in the description below. Here is how the mixture works. You need 3 things. First, the right soil. Any soil with a clay content between 15 and 35% will work. Most residential backyard soils in temperate zones fall in this range. If you scoop a handful of moist soil and squeeze it into a ball that holds its shape but does not smear like modeling clay, you have workable material. Second, the binder, a standard 50-pound bag of hydrated lime. Available at any farm supply store or masonry outlet, costs between $10 and $15. That single bag treats between 40 and 60 square feet of pathway at a 4-inch depth. Third, a pozzulan. This is optional but improves strength substantially. Wood ash from your fireplace, crushed clay brick chips from a demolition pile, or a small bag of pozzolanic fly ash from a masonry supplier will all work. Cost effectively free to $8. Total cost for a 4-foot by 30-foot garden path, roughly 120 square feet, comes in under $35 in materials at current U.S. retail prices. Compare that to $1,000 to $2,000 for a poured concrete equivalent. That is not a discount. That is a different economic universe. The process is straightforward. Excavate the path root to a depth of 6 inches. Screen the excavated soil to remove roots and large stones. Blend it with the lime at approximately 10 to 15% by volume. Add water gradually until the mixture reaches a consistency where a squeezed handful holds together but breaks cleanly under thumb pressure. Return the blended material to the trench in 2 or 3 shallow lifts, tamping each lift firmly with a hand tamper or a rented plate compactor. Allow the finished surface to cure for at least 14 days before regular foot traffic and 60 days before heavier loads. During the cure, mist the surface lightly if the weather is dry. The chemistry needs moisture to complete its work. One critical warning: do not substitute agricultural lime for hydrated lime. Agricultural lime is calcium carbonate, which is chemically inert in this application. You need hydrated lime, which is calcium hydroxide, sometimes labeled as builder's lime or type S lime. The bag will say so clearly. Wear gloves and eye protection when handling it. Hydrated lime is caustic to skin on prolonged contact. There are real limits, and you should know them. Stabilized earth paths are not suited for driveways carrying full-size vehicles or for surfaces subject to standing water. They perform best in well-drained soils and on gently sloped ground. In areas with very sandy soil, you may need to import a small amount of clay to bring the mixture into the correct plasticity range, and the finished surface has a warm, earthy tone, not the gray uniformity of Portland concrete. Some people love that appearance. Others prefer the cleaner look of modern hardscape. That is a personal choice. The stabilized earth path is a 9,000-year-old answer to a question the modern construction industry was never designed to ask. It does not replace your driveway or compete with poured concrete for structural applications, but for the cost of a bag of lime and an afternoon of honest work. It gives you a garden path that will still be there when your grandchildren are grown. Using the same chemistry the Romans documented in the 1st century BCE and the residents of Catalunya practiced 9,500 years ago. A lot of what this channel covers was nearly lost, not because it stopped working, but because the system was never designed to accommodate something that does not generate a monthly invoice. If discovering the lost science of self-sufficient homesteading matters to you, subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure this kind of knowledge keeps being found. If you had a wheelbarrow, a bag of lime, and a weekend to spend, would you lay a stabilized earth garden path across your backyard? Or would you still call 3 concrete contractors and pick the cheapest quote? I would genuinely like to know. Drop it in the comments.